Okay, microphone is turned on now. Spend freely, owe nothing. How to think about money without losing your soul. How to think about money while keeping your soul. I've been going down this rabbit hole lately about money, and it's kind of blowing my mind. So there was this time, and we're talking about before the 1900s, even way before then, when money wasn't this big deal it is today. Like, literally, it was just the tool you'd use when you'd need it. I was watching this documentary about the psychology and history of money, and it's kind of wild how much has changed. Back then, if you were a farmer or lived in some kind of self sustaining community, you could totally survive through bartering, working your land, using your skills, etc., etc. Money was more like a commodity that is useful sometimes, but not essential for everyday life. Then, somewhere along the way, some really strategic minds figured out that if you could control the money, you could basically control the people. And from that moment, everything kind of just shifted to what we have now. It's kind of like cell phones, you know? Before they existed, people were doing just fine. They connected with each other, handled their business, lived their lives without needing to be plugged in 24/7. It's not really about the phone itself as much as it's about everything we've attached to it. Money's the same way. I've stopped being just this it stopped being just this medium of exchange, and for some it became identity, a safety net, a validation system, and a scoreboard for how successful we are at life. Here's what really hit me from this documentary though. Spending money isn't actually the problem. Like, spending can bring you ease, momentum, even genuine happiness if you're being intentional about it. But even with all those things around money, I kept coming back to this. It's a thing. Some people compare it to a tool, like a hammer, that can build something beautiful depending on how you use it, or even useful. The real shift happens when you can see money clearly. Sometimes I see it as energy. It becomes like a mirror that reflects your value, your habits, your whole mindset back at you. The more I really get into it, the more I start to see that, I can use money on my own terms. I continue to be strategic. At present, I'm starting to control how it flows in and out of my world and my life. Sometimes I see it as a current you can ride direct and grow with actual clarity and confidence. You start choosing how you want to use it. That's honesty. How I'm working on it right now, and it feels like, yeah, that's honestly what I'm working on right now, and it feels like such a different way of thinking about everything. If this is hitting you the same way it's hitting me, I'm putting together more thoughts and content around this whole idea on Gumroad, YouTube, Substack, mental health, etc., financial power. It's the real trinity I'm going for these days. And so, yeah, just to kind of bring this reflection back a little bit, that really kind of bogged my mind because I was looking into living off the grid at one point, and I remember a YouTuber was saying maybe you probably shouldn't live off the grid because it's almost impossible nowadays with the technology and how connected we are. But he kind of suggested, why don't you be on as many grids as possible so that if anything were to happen, you could just jump ship and go into a different ship or go into a different space. And that's a thought. It's almost like there's this notion of, again, the Benjamin Franklin thing we talked about in one previous video where he was saying, why don't you make less money? No, no. He was saying, why don't you spend less and make more? You should be doing both. As far as like, if you want money, you should spend less money or get more money. You should be doing both. So this idea of like living off the grid was like, trying not to be bothered. And then the other idea of like being on as many grids as possible. So if anything were to bother you, you could just swap to another grid. You could be doing both. Have your little cabin in the woods, and then at the same time, you can own some real estate in another country, type shit. So there's a thought right there. And yeah, I haven't finished watching the documentary, but that is one very interesting documentary. It kind of exposes the truth around money. And honestly, the reason why I'm talking about this is because my circle growing up, we could have talked a little bit more about money, like what we're doing now. And I think there's absolute power in naming and talking about the things that you want in life. It's okay to want money, and we all start at different stages. And this is my stage where I'm kind of just like going through the history and the psychology of money. And I think it's very interesting that you can compare it to like having a cell phone, where at one point it was almost like, because I was reading this one book, um, something about the money changers. He wrote in like the 1900s or like 1800s or something. And the way he was talking about money in that book was almost like only a few group of people really would like exchange it amongst themselves, and like the farmers would kind of have their own trade and barter system, and farmers would only go to the city, or they would only use money when they wanted to like go to the city and like converse with people, or if they needed something from the store. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think the name of that YouTube documentary on money, I think it was on like Money Economy or something like that. Very interesting, very interesting. There was another point I wanted to talk about. Yeah, the history of money. That's something that's like very interesting. It'd be nice if they taught that in school, how to properly budget your finances. I know that point has been beat to death, and we'll probably talk about it in another video. That point's probably been like oversung. It's like, yes, we understand that there's like this thing around we should be teaching finances in school. They do teach finances once you get to college. You could learn finances, and that's like a thing that's a route you could take. I think we should start off a little bit earlier about it. That'd be nice. I mean, we're doing it now, and if you want this Substack reflection, it will be in the description below. So I actually want to know, because I'm just starting like this whole money journey. I'm just like learning about it, and it's some really interesting stuff. It's really interesting how there's people who say you probably shouldn't focus on money, but at the same time, you need it. I just think that's a very interesting outlook on life. And yeah, so we'll get back into this. The more reflections we do on this, we'll probably talk more about it. And what's interesting is like the people who have some of the most money. Um, I will say this before I leave this video, that some of the things that I've learned about the people who have the most money in the world, I mean, they smile for one, and they have like a very easygoing attitude about life, right? And at the same time, when it's time to turn on, it's like they're on, right? You know, one person that comes to mind is the Crown Prince. Every time you see him, he's kind of just like in this happy mood. And you could argue that, yeah, once you have trillions of dollars, that'll probably be your outlook on life too. You could argue that. But yeah, I hope you guys like this. And let's talk about money in the chats. Let's talk about it.